Welcome to the Devoted Way podcast, all about magic and miracles with me, Sora Schilling. It's time to hone in on your intuition, become artful, respectful, and nuanced with your relationship with energy, and live life based on your design. Your unique blueprint encoded with stardust from the ethereal realm and blood from those that have come before you. You know what to do and how to be, so trust in yourself. Hello, devoted star beings, our podcast folks out there. So today I have Catherine here with myself, and we wanted to have a sacred conversation around why feedback is so uncomfortable. And I had felt the call to have this conversation for two reasons. Number one is because in life in general, there are going to be opportunities, really great learning opportunities that are very stretchy when it comes to having a conversation where feedback might be required, or because you have a friend that's asking for some feedback. And sometimes when a friend asks for feedback, there are two ways that can go. One, because the friend actually wants to know the honest feedback, the truth of what it is that you're seeing. And other times, your friend is actually not requiring or asking for feedback, but maybe looking for reflections or validations or a celebration or an encouragement. So that's one reason why feedback could feel really uncomfortable. And the other reason is feedback is uncomfortable, especially when you are in an area of growth, like inside of a training where you're learning something and you need to receive information and considerations to help you continue to grow in whatever area that you're learning. And so before I even talk a little bit more about that, Catherine, any considerations for you around what you thought feedback was before entering into Devoted and what you feel like it is now?
I mean, I felt like feedback was really negative before. I don't know that I would have said that out loud, but just hearing the word feedback created a negative response in me for sure. And it's definitely been a growth experience to allow that to shift and for the word feedback to even lose some of its just crunchiness and that initial body response of, oh, that means something bad. Like that means I did something wrong. And I've actually really grown to appreciate clarity and feedback and the kindness that can actually be there. I feel that I thought that kindness was, oh, let me add in a bunch of fluff and I could grow from that. And I'm learning that that's not actually true. Like when you can come in with feedback and have a clear reflection for someone, either to give that or to receive that, I can actually grow from that because I have something to go on. And I feel that I am now in a space where I can actually receive clear feedback instead of taking clear feedback as meaning that was mean or this person doesn't like me or attaching stories. And so it's really been very fascinating to learn what it is to receive it, but then also what it is to give it and the differences in that growth for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're speaking, I was recollecting a memory of, back in school. I don't know about yourself, but back in school, every time there was a parent teacher conference and you as a student was a part of it, or for me specifically, it was around writing. Like my teachers, I don't recall very clear memories, but I have this visceral effect in me where anything I wrote, I'd get back a piece of paper and there was a lot of like red on it, like red markers of circles and things being crossed out, or these questions with a big question mark. And it made me feel like, one, you're right, I did something wrong. Two, that I was never going to get it. Three, that there was no way that I was going to be able to excel. And then I would create stories about me not being smart enough or well articulated, or that my grammar sucked. And how was I ever going to be able to do this? And those stories kind of compiled over and over. And so when I was in high school and I was in the alternative school, our conferences were actually my teacher and myself sitting there actually having a conversation about things, not just them telling you your grades and your GPA and telling you what you need to do or what you need to do to get that extra grade up or things like that. But instead, it was more around where do you see your growth and can we celebrate that, and what are some of your challenges, how can we support you in that, what are the things that you think you need to work on, here are the things that we feel like you need to work on, and here's how we're going to show you the things that you're talking about we think you're doing great at, and here's some reasons why we feel that way. And it blew my mind in regards to how feedback could be given, which is it being a dialogue and a two-way experience rather than something being told. So, including in relationships, when you hear someone say, like a partner say, I have to have a conversation with you, all of a sudden, everything in you just starts panicking, right? It's like, what did I do wrong? And so there's this thing of us having done something wrong and therefore we need to be corrected versus essentially what feedback is, which is not that you need to correct anything, but what if maybe there's areas of improvement or areas that you desire growth?
Yes. I every time you talk about your school experiences, it's like the best. I love it. As a homeschooler, I'm just like, oh wow, that's just like so cool. I know people who actually went to grade school and things feel similarly, but like I didn't really have a lot of those experiences. And even thinking back, I got a lot of you're doing great. And so even just listening to you talk about that, it was like, so that was the expected. So therefore it was, I should always receive, you are doing great. And therefore, if I ever didn't even receive, you're not doing great. Like I didn't even have to receive quote unquote bad feedback. It was just, if I didn't hear, you're not doing great, then I assumed that I wasn't doing well, which is just a really fascinating, because I did a lot of self-study. I did a lot of things on my own because I started planning out my own school years and all of those things. And I would take some classes with other homeschoolers, but even that dynamic was quite like you would get a grade, but it was still kind of like, you did great. Like, unless you really didn't do well, like you did great. And like, that was always that persona. And I'm really feeling that for myself. Like, I hadn't really put that together, how even just what we're told and that the assumption of what is expected, how much that creates well, if I'm not hearing that particular thing, then now I'm creating the story of I'm receiving bad feedback without ever even hearing anything, but I'm creating it. And I love how you brought in dialogue, because I never associated feedback with dialogue. I very much associated with, it's like a one-way conversation. So then you're having to like justify why, or, sit there and be all, oh, this was such a horrible experience, or I did something bad. Once again, we're back there. And the dialogue of feedback is something that I learned inside of Devoted. I never would have put those two things together. And it's very healing and it's very different. And I think it brings that humanness into that this is a conversation, and it really can be a conversation, and it is there for growth, and it can be a form of love. And that just wasn't something that I had learned. And it can be really hard to learn things as adults, particularly when we have stories associated with what they're supposed to be. Sometimes I feel like if we could learn these things as 5-year-olds, that would be so much nicer. But yes, I love the nature of the dialogue and how you learned that and how you bring that into Devoted, because it's a key piece of what you bring inside of Dex. And I've never experienced feedback in a loving dialogue situation anywhere except in Dex.
And that's true in regards to as an adult, because when I've sat in a lot of different experiences, trainings, and because we are all such lifelong learners in that way. And feedback is broken out in this particular way. And the way that it is taught and broken out as an adult, let's say in anything from yoga teacher training to whatever different types of teacher training, coaching teacher trainings, it's about it's almost like the first key ingredient is you have to be nice. And so you have to say these like generic sentences, which includes what you said. You're doing great. That was beautiful, right? Like,
Yes.
and what does that mean though? And why do you have to, or good job. You tried your best. Like, what does this mean? And so that first criteria is to be nice. And I don't understand that because number one, we're then taught that those are the words, like you said, that you have to hear over and over again. Two, we have no idea what that really means. So you're trying to have your person feel better with them knowing that as an adult, the second stage is now go ahead and tell them the thing that they need to work on. And it's going to be a bit crunchy and tender, right? So it's like, you did great. So something for you to work on. And then they like brace themselves. So the fact that you even said you did a great job or that was beautiful, and then you say so or but, and you can use and too. Same thing though, even though it's supposed to be different. And possibly already everything kind of crunches in you. And so I noticed that even when considering feedback inside of Devoted Energy Coaching School, us learning how do we do this in a way that's precise, that's very clear with examples and ways for them to honestly feel that they are deeply held. They're being really witnessed. They're being loved up on. We're not taking away their discomfort around further considerations, while them also being very open and honest in that dialogue to be like, I see that, or I hadn't considered that. For me to take a look at because they notice it's about them and a skill. So yeah. And so with that being said, could you tell me a little bit about how you started offering feedback and how you felt around it and what you've noticed as the difference?
Well, I totally started out by, oh my gosh, you did so great. Like that was my absolute go-to. I do begin my feedback with celebrations. Like I do notice that I love to begin there, but it has a different flavor, even from just my way of coming in. I'm not trying to take away the discomfort, like you said. I'm simply just celebrating the fact that they showed up in their discomfort and they did a thing that was really uncomfortable. That is just freaking worthy of celebration at all times, because it's uncomfortable to learn. It's uncomfortable to be in spaces they purposely showed up knowing they're going to receive feedback. And that takes guts. It just does. And so I love opening the space with that, but it also feels, as the feedback giver, a space to get clean for myself around, am I celebrating or am I like peacekeeping or caretaking, or like having this kind of almost making myself feel better with those words. And so ensuring that it's really for them and loving them up in that way, and that it's truly coming out of love. And I really, at one point, you had given some guidance around how to give feedback, and you used the words consideration or would you possibly consider, or have you considered? And I really love that word, because to me, it releases hierarchy, that whether we try to put it there or not, we feel that I'm giving feedback. Like if I personally am the one giving feedback to someone, it's really easy to feel like, oh, well, then that person must know more. And we don't talk about that inside. Well, we talk about it a lot, in the fact that that's not the case. We are all there learning. And so even just the idea of consideration feels much better to me as have you considered this? Because it does create that dialogue. And oh no, I was actually thinking this when that happened. And being able to give those really specific instances of, I noticed you used this word, or you had a really great question here, or you asked something and then this happened. And I witnessed that transformation and getting clear, and then having the space for what are they then hearing as well feels like a really beautiful gift inside of feedback. So it's not just I am giving feedback, giving it to someone and assuming that they are hearing the love, that they are in fact hearing what I'm saying, because we all have our own things that we hold about feedback. And so giving that space for, okay, how does that land? What did you hear? What came up for you? And creating that dialogue space. I didn't know how to do that at the beginning of giving feedback. And so that's been a really neat thing to experience too, to have conversations.
Yeah. And when giving feedback, here's a couple of tips for all of you that are listening for whatever various reasons you might be doing this for, let's say, a client or a course or training that you are holding. And then we'll talk a little bit about when it comes to, let's say, your team members or a friend. But inside of the space, there are two areas that I address. Number one is what kind of feedback are you giving? Like, how are you setting it up? And yes, there is a framework, but there's a precision to it that I'll talk about. And then the other is how do you even use your voice, your expression, your body language to relay the safety of there being an openness for the conversation to occur so that it's not just you giving feedback, but that there really is a dialogue. And so in the first part regarding how to go about doing it, I do believe having that first big generic celebration is key in regards to they know, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going into some feedback mode. So, I'm usually like, okay, let's give some feedback. Catherine, I'll start with you. And I may say good job, but then I'll say why, right? So like good job, I'm already noticing the way that you're like, oh, feeling relief. So just the fact that you entered into this with all your feels, great job. I'm celebrating you for that, And so hence that's very specific, not just in general, you did a great job. Right. Calling out the elephant in the room and honoring their courage around that, like you said. And then I go into further celebrations and I go step by step through the journey they were in to talk about what they did really well. So, really honoring how you entered in with your voice and the texture and the tone of it when you opened up the space for your client. You were easeful. It didn't feel like you were nervous, and you were really well present in that experience in the beginning with your client. Like that's really precise, right? And so I give those precise celebrations. And then move into, okay, so are you ready for me to give you some additional further considerations? And so here are some of the further considerations. And then I get very specific again. Like, for example, I'd love for you to take a look at possibly your word choices. I notice that you use this word quite often. And as you're moving through this process, that one word may or may not resonate with your client. How does that feel for you? Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. I can see that. Right. So there's this way of either you just give a quick, like, how does that feel? Or you're just specific and you lay it out one thing after another. I noticed that you were pulled in one direction, but you started in another. And so, whenever that happens, here's a couple of things to consider. One, it's not you, it's your client. So, your client's very powerful. So, let's really just honor that. Number two, though, it's really about you remembering what is the through line. And so, how do you continue to have that in your awareness? And so, I bring those very specifics. The third thing I do then is I acknowledge the person's medicine. Every single person that you encounter as a student they are very different. So I will celebrate now. It's not even celebrating. It's acknowledging the serious potency of a person and their natural way of being that I want to identify and address that will be very different for each person. And so that comes through based on how they showed up. So I may say something like, Catherine, I want to take a moment to honor the medicine of your ability to be incredibly reflective. And in that space, you open it up so much so for your client to be able to start modeling that for themselves. You do that beautifully. That is part of your medicine. And I'm very specific around that. And then after that, it's just so that's it. Like, how are you feeling about it? Or take some time with that and notice what comes up for you. I'm here to listen or to advise based on whatever else comes up for you. So those are kind of like the themes that I might put things in. And then when it comes to your body language and your tone, I don't talk like this the whole time. Like I notice a lot of people do that. They're like, that was so well done. And here's some further considerations. And not that there's anything wrong here, but it's all just and it's just like bright-eyed, like and further considerations to me is like we're getting some down to some juicy things. And so my tone and my expression is a bit more serious and it's a bit more grounded. It's not piercing where they think I'm mad at them, but we're bringing it down so that they could actually hear it and receive it. Because if it's just like this, they don't really know what to do with this feedback when you're talking like this the whole time. They're like, is it like it I don't know. Like, I don't know how that lands. So when someone comes to me with love and warmth and an openness, but their voice lowers, I lower in. Like I just kind of get rounded into it. I can hear it better. And then I might lean in more, right? And I might just look at them a little bit further and I won't use my head as much. I might still use my hands because I'm trying to bring them into the experience or have them feel it. I might place my hands on my heart so that they feel my love in that direction. And then when it comes to their medicine, I may bring my voice a little bit more in a space of awe, because that's what I am. I'm not celebrating. So my voice isn't an octave higher. I'm just profoundly in awe and enchanted and in gratitude for this ability to see them in that way. And so, therefore, my body language, my tone of voice, the way that I express myself is a very particular way because I desire for my students to receive it in a particular way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you do. Like that is how you give feedback. I have experienced it many times. And there is a difference, but I also remember that sometimes, you would remind us to come in with the personal, like particularly at the beginning, like we don't have to be all like serious. We can really love them and like be there with them. And I love how as you bring in feedback, you do talk about body language because so often all of the things that we are doing is online, and yet our body language even online matters. And so even if they can't see it as much, but I'm feeling it, like it helps me even pay attention to how am I in my body? Am I really like tight? And it almost puts the focus back on me. Whereas when you talk about engaging your body in how you give feedback, it feels more conversational just in the fact that you're engaging your body because the person who's across from you moves too. Like they really can feel that. And so it's such a dynamic experience. The feedback that you give, how you encourage all of us to learn not only how to receive, but how to give. Because we also learn how to give feedback inside of Dex, which is very stretchy. To learn, it's a different kind of stretch to learn how to give and then how to receive.
Yeah. And it's so important to learn how to do both for sure. So let's talk finally, just one last thing about receiving feedback as a team member, as a friend, as a colleague, that there's still these opportunities for growth. And the way that I'd love to enter the conversation around feedback in this particular episode is around when you notice that there is some awkwardness or crunchiness in the field, right? So this has happened to us. This has happened to myself recently with a coach, and I bring it up all the time. And so when I feel like something is a little off, I actually stop the conversation because I can no longer pretend. Like why go for 45 minutes pretending like everything is okay and everything is off? The dialogue is off, the feelings are off, and it's so uncomfortable. And I choose not to be in that kind of discomfort. I'd rather be in the discomfort of understanding why there's this weirdness in the field between two people versus just being in the weirdness. Like there's no reason for that. And so I very much, I know that you have experienced this, will say, you know what, can we just take a moment? Something is off. Do you feel it? I feel like there's something that is off, and I'd love for us to take a moment to clear it and even figure out what it is. Here's what I believe it might be from my personal standpoint. And also want to take ownership of how this might have occurred because I am prickly as F and I could come across as being really intense or abrasive. And so here's what I'm thinking, but I could be completely off. What's going on with you? What do you think this is about? So can you share with me your experience with that?
Well, firstly, you do call it out. And I've experienced it.
Even right now, you're like, oh yeah, you do.
Yeah, you totally do. Like you do this for sure. Yeah, I can like feel it. But I also think back to, because we've been in this team relationship for over a year and a half now. And so as I think about the evolution of that, it was really hard for me at the beginning when you would bring something up, because I would be, deer in the head, absolute deer in the headlights, scary. Like, who does this? Like, who talks like this? Who brings this up? You're just supposed to pretend that it's not there. Like, I was thoroughly confused, not used to being in team environments or relationships, where we actually talked about the thing instead of just talking around the thing. And so that's just a whole new experience. And so I appreciate your ability to bring it up. And then I also appreciate your ability to not take me out of my discomfort. You are not there to rescue me or pluck me out. And you also let me walk through my own process of clearing it for myself. So there are small things sometimes where there was just maybe a miscommunication or something, and there was a small thing that was said and it just got like, it became a big thing, but it can very quickly be cleared. And you're so incredible at bringing that up, and then all of us being able to clear it and it feeling really settled. And it's not the fact that we can actually do that. Like, it is in our ability in our relationships to have a conversation. You're like, something feels kind of off. And you can have a 2-minute conversation and actually clear the thing instead of talking around the thing for the next 2 weeks. It changes things. So, and I'm learning this even in my personal life. But then sometimes there are bigger things. And so what does it look like to be honest about those things and then give our people the space to work through it? And then also continue to be in the conversation of, okay, where are you? Are you working on the thing? Are you clearing the thing? Are you doing the work that you need to be doing to do that? And so small things, big things, bringing up the thing, it changes the dynamic of a relationship. It changes how you show up in all your relationships. I'm different in all of my relationships because of how I've learned to relate inside of Dex and inside of Devoted.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, because what's different, what I find makes such an incredible relationship, and other divine friends have taught me how to do this, and I've taught other friends and colleagues as well. But one of the things that I get really frustrated with in the beginning, but I also know it's a learning, is, for example, like, this hasn't happened to us, but a beautiful one is you and I come together, let's say, and we are retreating together. And I will say, you know what? I hope you just know that when I get really quiet, my introvertedness and my end of the day need for us to be able to chill and be together without conversing, doesn't mean that I'm angry with you. It means I'm comfortable enough to sit there with you in total silence and I'm good. You know that, right? If you don't, I want you to know that. And you're like, okay, cool, right? And then I think you said something like, I would have before made up a story around it, but I
Mhm.
don't anymore. And I recognize that it's okay to be in the silence. And I'm learning how to do that too. And so that was a beautiful exchange. There was another time where there was a whole gathering of folks, and I was sharing that there was an energy shift that happened. And then I felt really left out. And in that space of feeling left out, I was waiting for each person to come to me with their perspective, what their ideas were, what they thought were happening. And instead, was this weird silence with deer in headlights being like, I'm so sorry you felt that way. And that was it. And I'm like, it's not about being sorry that I feel that way. In actuality, that's quite a big bypass, right? It's quite a big, like, I'm just going to lay it back on you because they're uncomfortable versus, wow, that makes me really uncomfortable. I can totally see what you're talking about, and I don't have the words for this yet. Can you give me one moment for me to figure out why that makes me so uncomfortable and why all I want to do is say, I'm so sorry, and just kind of give it back to you? Right. And that's the thing that I find happens a lot amongst ourselves in our spiritual world. It's, I'm so sorry you felt that way. Right. And um, I recognize and witness you in your feelings. And then that's it. That's not a conversation. This person just came to you saying, this is what I'm feeling. There's an energy that's a weirdness going on. I'd like to clear it so that we can move on into another neutral space. And so we all need to now take responsibility around what's actually coming up for each of us to have a voice in so that we can alchemize this whole misunderstanding. But often we're taught, I witnessed you. I'm so sorry. Totally understand where you're coming from. This won't happen again. Or what can we do? Or, and then that's it. It's like just these brief little things versus a deepening into, wow, let's really bring out the elephant. Like, wow, I see you. Or, wow, the fact that you're so emotional about it, I'm curious around what that is because I didn't even think that that was going to be such an emotional experience for anyone. Or, wow, actually thinking about it, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. And I don't know if I'm uncomfortable because of the conversation or what happened. Like, let's get into that. Like, that's the meatiness of, I feel like, what deepening into relationships are.
Yeah. And even just listening to you talk about that, that I would hope now, if I was put in that situation where it was, oh my gosh, I came with a lot of emotions and I was feeling this thing, that I would be able to articulate, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. And that I would be willing to say that this is what I'm feeling, and I see you in your feelings, and I don't even know how to articulate anything more than I am feeling the uncomfortable feelings of being with you in your emotions. And that I would have the awareness to do that, because I think so often when people come with emotions, it is that deer in the headlights, because we're like, oh, someone's feeling emotions, I should fix it. It was my fault, I needed to change something. Or it comes to us, but not in a self-responsibility us, more a blame or that fix it mode, because fix it is not connection. Fix it is, that feels bypassing as well, because you're not acknowledging the emotions and the human of the person who's in front of you. But it takes that awareness and the practice of being with people who have those conversations, which is also something I'm realizing, that though I am learning how to have these conversations and really engage in these dialogues, it doesn't happen in all of my relationships. So even if I go through a period of time when, quote unquote, everything's going really great in relationships, and there aren't some of these a little bit more tender, uncomfortable conversations, I get out of practice. Like I'm not in that. And it takes me a minute. It takes me a minute to get there. Or to circle back around and say, let me try that again. because that was not the way that I wanted that to go. And that doesn't feel true. And I'm feeling some continual niggles. So let me come back. Let me circle back around with you.
And even say that out loud. I don't know if
Yes.
people understand that, like that you say out loud, you know what? Let me try that again. Let's just pause there because that didn't, I wasn't voicing that in the way that I would like to. Can we pause here? And actually saying that out loud.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of keeping everything inside and doing all that internal processing and always only trying, I think it's that idea of only trying to let the words that come out of your mouth be really polished and clear. Like we get into that, like, oh, I have to be precise and clean and, all of those things, which yes. And like what does it mean to be human in these instances? What does it mean to be in the discomfort of our own emotions and be able to voice out that we don't know, and not an I don't know, but, or an I don't know, let me try to come up with the answer as I'm saying the words I don't know, but just simply being in the I don't know. There's a discomfort there, but there's also a camaraderie that's there.
Yeah. And I think it's valuable to consider for everyone. We do this all the time inside of Devoted, whether it's inside of Devoted Energy Coaching School with our fellow gems, which are our students, or we do this amongst each other as team members, or we do this because we are, in relationship, in community together. It doesn't matter when we think about our quote roles inside of our community. We are all practicing this. And I find that there's so many folks out there who talk about this, but I wonder how, because conceptually, of course, it's easy to understand. But my question and curiosity is how often are people actually doing this in any and every sort of way? I do this with my mentors all the time, those that are years of experience. If they say something that feels off to me, I will say, that felt a little like an ouchie. I'd like to address what just happened there so that I don't feel and continue to feel the way that I'm feeling. Are you open for me providing you feedback? I say that to my grandmothers, my mentors, And so the practice of it happens on a day-to-day basis. And I find inside of this space, I hope for folks to realize it is very uncomfortable, as uncomfortable as F every single time. But in order to continue to deepen into your ability to lead and understand circular leadership, this is a must, I believe. The ability to have these kinds of conversations over and over and over again with anyone if you're feeling some niggles.
And like honoring the practice that it takes. I think I remember being inside of decks at the very, very beginning and thinking, why don't I know how to do this? Or why don't I already have this together on like class 1 or class 2? And it really is a practice. And it's a practice in the sense of it's a practicing for myself because, am I willing, am I aware of the niggle and able to articulate and open my mouth to start the conversation? I think we're really good at like internally having some conversations and then not actually doing the open our mouth part to have the conversation. So that's kind of a key bit to this. We do have to open our mouth. And I love how earlier you talked about how it is about saying out loud, oh, I don't know, or, oh, let me circle back to that because I'm still feeling some niggles. I think that's been the biggest thing for me, particularly in my learning, because you have been doing this for so long. So there was a piece of that comparison that you find when you're watching other people do things where you're like, oh, but I don't do it like so-and-so, or this person does it so much better. And of course, none of us know the internal dialogue that's happening with those around us. But will we give ourselves the permission to show up and like stumble through it? Because this does not come naturally. Like I will be the first to say. And then when you're around people and you are practicing, when I hear someone else come in and say, "Ooh, could I actually try that again? Like that didn't feel good," or I breathe the biggest sigh of relief because I'm like, oh, okay, like it's okay for me to try that again. And because that isn't something that we always or often even do in our culture. And so remembering that it's not about one day we just decide that we're going to start having conversations like this and they just go so smoothly and easily, and there's like it's kind of no, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so uncomfortable and it's so beautiful, because you can go to someone and say, all right, this just happened and I'm feeling this niggle and I don't even know where this niggle is. It might be a me thing. It might be something that has nothing to do with this conversation. It might have to do with this conversation. It might have to do with something that's happening in your life that I don't even know about, but there's something in the field and I'm feeling it. And so it takes that blame and that finger pointing out of it and just brings in that place of curiosity where you can once again have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, this was a good conversation
Yes.
around discomfort, the ability to be open, different ways of looking at feedback, and even feedback when it comes to training your students, feedback from the energy and you and another person, and a feedback with even without words, there being something a little off and wanting to address that, and feedback when there's something that truly you desire to share, that is coming from a place of a little ouchy in you, or feedback because you're realizing that there might be a way that you'd like to receive certain things. And so you're providing someone ability to understand how you receive that's different than the way that they do. So there's so many different ways where I feel like feedback is so important. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what a sacred conversation that is rich and human, like truly human, can look like and feel like. So I hope everyone else continues to find spaces where they can fumble and practice and be with all the nerves, because that's how we all began, including me. And we have to start somewhere. Thanks, everyone. It is a blessing to serve you. My deepest desire is to bring nourishment to your soul, activate and enliven your inner landscape, and find inspiration through the sacred stories of others and myself, so we remember we are collectively woven. If you would like to learn more about mysticism, spiritual devotion, magic and intuition, sacred leadership, business practices, and devoted energy coaching, please make sure you subscribe to Devoted Way Podcast. As I continue to serve, may I humbly ask for a sacred exchange. I would be so appreciative if you would write a love note, otherwise known as a review. Share the episode with your friends and community members, and engage with me on Instagram at Devoted Way. If you have any questions you desire to be answered on Devoted Way Podcast, please head over to devotedway.com and send me an email. Stay sacred and discover your path and join the Devoted Way. May magic and miracles occur in your life every day as you co-create a synchronistic new world with the Great Mother. Until next time, this is Sora Schilling.